Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Baltimore and Chesapeake Shipwatchers podcast. My name is Kipp. I'm the director of the Transportation Distribution Logistics Institute here at CCBC, and have with us Mike. Hey, Mike.
Morning, I'm Mike Singer, community manager for the Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay Shipwatchers. We are a local maritime advocacy group and help to promote all things to do with the port. And so now we have this podcast, and we're on podcast number 5. Or is this 5A or 5B?
Yeah, this one's going to be 5B. 5A is in Never Never Land.
The can. Well, not
yeah,
the can, but the other can.
yeah. It
The
went in the other
circular
can.
file.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the.
We apparently broke the software, and
We're pros now.
So in dealing with technical support yesterday and finding out that we could not recover the video was a little disappointing. So it's now Saturday morning. We're recording 5B. We have our coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not a prop. Oh, look at that. It matches my
Oh,
shirt. How did that happen?
I guess mine's supposed to match.
Well, you're just happy Saturday morning because you're thrilled to be here. That's
Absolutely.
what your coffee cup says.
Absolutely.
That's our story, and we're sticking to it.
All right, so we're gonna go back through this and pick up on some topics that we need to cover from this past week, and then some actually new stuff that actually took place. So it's kind of good that we were able to do this on a Saturday. So
Yeah.
we're gonna start off with some Dali ship updates. Mike, I think you've got some updates on that for us.
Yep. So the Baltimore International Seafair Center was able to visit the Dali and visit the crew, spend some time with them last Friday. So, gosh, more than a week ago now.
And correct me if I'm wrong. It's still tied up at berth 1.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they're still working hard at getting things off the bow. Sometimes it's big, huge things, which we'll show here in a minute. Sometimes they've got, I don't know what it is, like one of those big contractor bags, and they're just putting small junk. I mean, it's so small that when you look on the live stream, it looks like they're lifting up a cotton ball from whatever 6 miles or however far the camera is from it. But
how's that 4K camera working out now that the ship is up against the terminal and not close to the bridge?
Well, the 4K is always better. I mean, you can see people on the bow. They're still fuzzies because it's 6 miles away. But last night, we were tracking a ship that came in, one of the big ACL Conroes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty big ship. It's, I don't know, 850. Everything online is by meters, so I only know the metric. But 850, 900 feet. They're the largest Conroes in the world. So Conroe, containers on the top and inside, on the back and the front, and then the middle there's a superstructure that houses the ro-ro, the roll-on, roll-off stuff, or most of it. So the largest...
The benefit of that ship is multiple types of cargo, and so they're able to maximize the amount of cargo or the volume of cargo on a particular ship. So that's
right.
They have these conversion or multi-purpose ships that for those types of purposes.
Right. So in other words, you can run one ship and load it with different types of cargo, and you don't have to send 2 smaller ships all over the place. You've got this one big, and then interesting, like we talked about before, these ACL Conroes, they're the G4 model. They have these extended sides so that when the containers slip in, they can't fall out. So this company, ACL, 0 container loss record. So pretty cool stuff. But anyway, largest Conroes in the world. There's only 5 of them, and they all come here to Baltimore. So kind of a neat little thing, I think.
That is neat.
But anyway, so what I was trying to say is we were tracking the ship coming in, and we have both cameras. We still have the original camera, and at night it's I mean, we loved it when it was all we had, but now that we have the 4K camera, it's like, oh my goodness, so much better. I mean, and the night vision is amazing. It's amazing. So anyway, Seafarers, the Baltimore International Seafarer Center visited the Dali last Friday. Was able to, spend some time with the crew. We're gonna have to. We might have to do a whole segment the next podcast about all those details, which will be great. Maybe we'll have Josh on, who runs the Seafarer Center, so that would be great. But so I wanted to see if I could share some pictures. Let's see. So I don't know if you can see this. I don't know if you can see me pointing to it because this is the first few times we've tried to use this. There's actually a tarp here strapped to tied to the bow of the ship with a barge here. So as they're unloading things, they're guarding them from falling into the water. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So in that picture, and I'm not sure that I'm guessing you've got a little cursor or something that you're showing. What Mike's talking about is the if you look at the bow or the front part of the ship, you see the blue portion, and then as you kind of look down, it does kind of look like a very large tarp. This is what you're talking about, Mike.
Yes, thank you.
So definitely some purposeful actions in order to mitigate any further, as much, materials from falling into the water, because they're still going to go and clean all of that up, and they're monitoring and watching all of that. But it's but they're still doing things to also prevent that, to make those impacts as less as possible.
Right, because I'm sure the last thing you want to do, and I mean, they've got to do this work somewhere, and this is really probably the best place in the port to do it. Just for several reasons. There's a large bulkhead that isn't too busy right now, and when they brought the ship in, they weren't sure about the depths, and so they had to bring it into the deepest section, and then they were able to scoot it down into the more shallow section. But I'm sure no matter where you are, the last thing you want to do is add more junk to the bottom, right, where you're going to have ships come and go, because now you're even doing more work. But anyway, check this out. This is them using this giant spreader frame. So it's, look at the size of the containers on that picture. Well, first let's check. Can you see the photo?
Yes.
There's that. If you look at the size of those containers, now look at that. We would call it a spreader frame, I think. So it spreads out the load, so it's over top of what you're lifting. And that is a chunk of roadway that they're just lifting up like it's a giant piece of paper or something. Just amazing, the work that they're doing. And so here's what's left. So you can see some of the support structure that would have been underneath the roadway, which is, the metal that you see at the top of the photo here. And then in the lower left corner, you can see, I think, what was one of the four legs of the triangular pylon that holds the main structure of the Key Bridge up. I think this is one of the legs that they cut with a diamond saw. I mean,
you can see the cut in this picture. You can see the portion where you got the rebar stuck out, and that's where it broke or collapsed as it was going down. And they had some a piece longer than that, and so in trying to secure the ship through all of the through the process of pulling the bridge structure out, they had to go and do some preliminary cuts. This is one of those, and you could see where that diamond blade cut right into that, that concrete, and that's pretty thick. So you can imagine the type of, the size of the cutting tool used to go into that.
Right. And even though we had this great camera and by the way, the same camera that caught the accident itself, but even though we had this great camera and we were zoomed in on this as best as we could, sometimes for days you really couldn't tell what was going on because it was, there were, ships or cranes in front of it, or, they were doing dives to make sure that there were, just so much going on behind the scenes that even when you have a camera on it all the time, you still can't tell what's going on for days sometimes. Yeah. Just fascinating processes here. Yeah. So so done with the Dali there, but
okay.
So then
you got some channel updates also.
Yes. So if you remember, the Unified Command had said that they were going to be, their target was to have the full original 700-foot wide channel open by the end of the month. And they just came out with an update that said it's more like June 8th or 12th, or June 8th to the 10th is their estimates here. So let me just read a little bit about this. Based on latest dive surveys and engineering analysis conducted after the precision cutting and refloating of the MV Dali, the work to restore the federal channel is projected to conclude June 8th through the 10th, so somewhere in that range. The adjusted timing accounts for complexity of the cutting and rigging required to lift portions of the large span, which we have on camera right now. And it also accounts for safety measures and possible inclement weather potentially impacting ongoing salvage operations. So I heard a little thing on the news. I think it was earlier this week that 18 out of 20 weekends this year were rain.
Yeah.
So, I think, they might still be working on the weekend, but it's nowhere near when the shipping channel was closed and, oh my gosh, we're going to work every day so we can get everybody in the port back to work. Now that the shipping channel is open, maybe they can take weekends off. I'm not sure. But so you can imagine how if it was raining every weekend, it still affected them, back then.
I mean, and also think about the they're doing all this over water. So,
right.
Even changes in currents and tides and, if there is a breeze which kicks up water, that creates some instability in everybody's efforts for, during that recovery process.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with this. I'm okay if the Unified Command has to come out and extend certain types of, times or date, situations because of this. I mean, again,
oh my gosh, absolutely, yeah. I wasn't being critical at all. Just,
I didn't take that as
mm-hmm.
critical at all. That
mm-hmm.
was, hey, I'm okay, with this. Yeah, it's definitely not weeks and months, but it's, hey, look, we're doing this in a systematic way. The Unified Command is trying to make sure that everybody who is working on this, this phase of the project is safe. We don't need another, any more loss of life and in this. So that's, I'm okay with all of this. And they've gotten it to the point where we can accept ships back at, in and out of the port now. So,
right. And then, hey, let's take a good look at this and let's give folks, interested parties, port partners, business interests, a realistic date. Let's give them an updated, realistic date, because they've always said that that's what they wanted to do. Back when we told the pilot story, right? Back when we talked about, what was it, podcast number 3, where we went to the meeting and Colonel Pachason was talking about how much she appreciated how upfront and direct the pilots were. Hey, this is what we need, this minimum 400 width, so we can just run everything through here that we always have. Single file, one way at a time, but we can, anything that used to come through here, and then that way they had a realistic goal that they could shoot for and reach it the first time. Mm-hmm. So I would say very Army like.
Sure, but I mean, think about who is involved in the unified command and Army Corps of Engineers. That's what they're built around. Is right. That structure and management skill set of for project management. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So that is some good news on some of those updates. But we did this past week we did have an event. We had Memorial Day, and there is connectivity to Memorial Day in the maritime industry. You got some, and within the Port of Baltimore, there's a lot of Memorial Day connectivity also. So you've got a couple of things that related to Memorial Day you want to chat about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to cover Memorial Day, and then I thought about it. There's several local tie-ins. So why don't we talk about those? So when we think about Memorial Day, we think about those lives that were lost serving our country. And one time when that happened, during World War II, and there were Liberty ships built. Mm-hmm. So these supply ships that were built to basically supply the war effort in Europe. So these 2,700 Liberty ships were built in 18 different shipyards. So that's just fascinating to me. Hey, let's come up with a design. Let's send out a drawing, and we're going to be able to get 18 different shipyards build the same thing. Pretty interesting to me. So 384 of those ships, those Liberty ships, were built right here in Baltimore at the Fairfield yard of Bethlehem Steel. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking out from Fort McHenry over to the right, or across from Seagirt, if you will, across from the big container terminal, the big cranes. So 384 ships were built here in Fairfield, in Baltimore. And so one of the stories I heard was, we're going to build so many of these ships that our enemies aren't going to be able to sink all of them with like torpedoes, which is, gosh, when you think about that, okay, so you're going to sign up for one of these ships and that you might not make it back because we're going to build so many ships that they can't sink them all. So what does that mean? So they're going to sink some of them. So, maybe it's not different. I don't know. It just seems like a different time when people would just jump at the chance to volunteer themselves for something like that.
Absolutely.
Anyway, but out of the 2,700 ships, 200 of them were sunk. Now, that doesn't sound like a bad percentage when you thought about how they thought about, we're going to make so many of these, they'll never sink them all. And so I don't know, what did that mean? Half, a quarter? I don't know. So 10%, so 200 of those ships sunk. So each one of those ships was staffed by 55 to 70 people. So when you do that math, that's 11,000 lives lost. So they all didn't come from here, but we built 384 ships. And you could say that more than half of those were sunk, not necessarily the ones from here, and 11,000 lives lost. So
it's quite a bit of an impact when you break it down to that, that detail of a level.
Yeah.
And when you go through history class or do some historical research on various various wars that the U.S. has been involved with, and look at some of those staggering numbers, really drilling it down to that level, and kind of making the humanistic understanding of that metric is pretty impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, wanted to kind of cover that and give maybe a local tie-in.
Sure, absolutely. There's quite a bit of history on the Liberty ship effort during World War II, especially
Mhm.
here in Baltimore with all of the shipbuilding that was taking place. In
Absolutely.
listening to some of the Sparrows Point history and Bethlehem Steel, and understanding what that what they were doing and being involved in the steel production and then the ship manufacturing, and to the point where they were cranking out a ship every day, and it was taking 30 days. And now these ships were coming in pieces and kits and sub assemblies and things, but they had perfected this process to build these ships to the point where they were able to crank out a ship every 30 days. And
Yeah.
about every day there was a ship leaving port out to the theater. So just
Right. Because they had
really,
so
really
many working at once. Yeah.
correct,
Just,
correct.
yeah. Yeah. And we'll have to have, I don't have that photo ready, but I think we've seen those photos of
Yeah,
Fairfield with, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 ships in a row with what looks like, um, not stable, like wooden scaffolding around each one as they build it up. Just amazing to think about. That's a whole podcast in
sure,
itself. What's
absolutely, absolutely.
that'll be what podcast 48 or something coming up. We'll figure it out.
Yep.
We've got when you talk about just Baltimore maritime history, we could probably go what
Yes.
10, 20 podcasts just on that.
There is quite a bit on that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The there's another historical operation that took place over the weekend. Also, this was the placing of the historic Francis Scott Key Buoy out in the harbor by the Coast Guard.
Yeah,
And
you've got some really cool details on that.
yeah,
You dug up some good stuff. Let's hear
I
it. Let's have it.
actually found an article written in the Dundalk Eagle back in 2016 that
Hmm.
where they had provided some historical information on this, and I'll recap what the article says.
Mm-hmm.
So this really is this year is the 43rd annual spring setting of the historic buoy.
Mm-hmm.
And this buoy, if you're not familiar with it, before the Key Bridge collapse, you could drive over the Key Bridge headed south or west. I don't know how the directional loop was on the
Mm-hmm.
inner loop. If you looked over the side, I don't be careful driving, but you could
Yes.
see the buoy. You could see the buoy out there at the foot of the north side of the bridge, on the inner part of the river.
Yeah.
And,
So maybe Sparrows Point to Curtis Bay. So
correct,
I don't know, east to west, maybe.
exactly.
It
So
kind of runs on an angle, so people get confused when they try to talk
right,
about direction. But anyway, sorry.
no, all good. So each spring, the Coast Guard sets the buoy out there as a historical reminder of the Star Spangled Banner being created at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the place where they put it is the approximate location of where Francis Scott Key was supposed to have witnessed the bombardment of Fort McHenry in 1814.
So wait a minute. You're telling me they don't know exactly where he was hundreds of years ago? How can they not know that?
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with a number of what I would consider professionals with or history buffs on this, and
Mm-hmm.
yes, it is an approximate. Um, the how this came about was in 1914. There was a buoy that was placed in what was considered the almost the exact location for
Ah,
as part of
gotcha.
the centennial celebration of the Battle of Baltimore, and it was immediately removed
Cool.
after that celebration. So what they did was they took it as many historical accounts of the British ship that Francis Scott Key was being held on that evening. And so there are some accounts that kind of explain what wharf or what inlet or that it was aligned with. So the historians of 1914 had determined that there was this particular location, and they set this buoy out. And
Yeah.
then
And so
there
when
was
you think about that, you're talking about, you're only talking about 100 years.
correct, correct.
That's amazing to think about. So,
You know,
you,
100 years to us is what, 1924. I mean, this is kind of the kind of that perspective.
right. Yes.
So there wasn't much done until the 1970s. There was a buoy put out temporarily in the 1971 and the 1972 season to
Mm-hmm.
commemorate a couple of other celebrations that Baltimore was commemorating during those 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was an effort to get a joint resolution passed in 1979, and Governor Harry Hughes signed it into law that this buoy was to be placed every spring and in commemoration of the Star Spangled Banner. And so
So
every
that's
year,
how it wound up on the NOAA chart.
correct. And so in that iteration where the law was passed,
Mm-hmm.
they actually moved the location of the buoy closer to shore to get it out of the navigational channel for ships to come in and out. And
Oh,
so
come on. You
yeah,
can't go around it. I mean,
yeah,
no. Okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
So they can't play Frogger or as the kids play now, Crossy Roads. You can't play that out in the harbor with this buoy just because we want to,
No.
commemorate this.
Yeah.
But it's in a close enough location to represent the historical importance. This
Mm-hmm.
year's iteration, this year's placing, is actually even further away from that 1914 location because of the bridge collapse. So if you are in and around the area, maybe you're out in your boat and
Mm-hmm.
having a Sunday afternoon out on the water, and you go by, you can see the buoy. It's out there, but it's not the exact location by any means for a number of different safety reasons. So
Right, right. And if I could add, um, you know, once they moved the location, what, in the 70s, you're saying, and it's on the chart. There's a location actually on the chart. If you look at the NOAA shipping channel chart, right, there's a location, and we could see that on the camera. As a matter of fact, do you know that some people may not know? So they built um, those new power lines
mm-hmm.
right next to the bridge. What, 2 years ago?
Right.
And then, wouldn't you know it, where they normally put the Francis Scott Key Buoy, um, just barely, if the tides and the winds are right, it just barely sneaks out off to the side and does like a peekaboo, just because of the way the camera angle happens to be, right?
Gotcha.
And so some days you could see it, some days you couldn't.
Okay.
But because we're used to seeing it on the camera, we know that it's not in its normal, like, NOAA chart place. And I think my guess would be because it's too close to all the alternate channels, and they didn't want to make things confusing. And
Right.
besides, they know people want to visit it.
Right.
Touring ships, past little tour, ships from the harbor come out and, show people the buoy. And so maybe they just decided, hey, let's really make sure we get this out of the way, because
Yeah.
we've got, the recreational vehicles using the Hawkins Point channel. We've got smaller commercial vehicles using what they called the Fort Carroll channel,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the main Fort McHenry channel, or half of it, which is what the big ships are currently using. So maybe they thought, okay, way too close to all this stuff. Let's back it up,
Yeah.
make it a little closer to the shore.
So it's a good compromise to be able to still celebrate and follow our traditions and continue to move forward after the bridge collapse, but still allow for all of that work to continue. And
Yeah, some resumption of normalcy,
yep.
while you're working really hard to get everything else back to normal.
So that buoy will be it's typically placed around Memorial Day weekend,
Mm-hmm.
in celebration and commemoration, and they keep the buoy. The Coast Guard keeps the buoy out until the December timeframe, and then they pull it back up to prevent any ice related damage for
Mm-hmm.
the winter season coming through, and it gives them a chance to inspect and clean the buoy and repaint any spots that are needed to keep it fresh and clean.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
Yep.
that's a quick update on the Francis Scott Key Buoy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was some news that came out on Friday, and I got an alert through some Maryland Department of Transportation email notifications that the RFP, the request for pricing or quoting for the Francis Scott Key Bridge replacement, has been announced.
Right. Right. And I kept hearing that it was going to be by the end of the month, and so that was the 31st, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Right.
right there.
Yesterday. So they made it. They made it. But there were a few interesting things that now I'll be honest with you, true confessions, I did not read it. But I know some people who did, some people who are more technically capable as far as construction and proposals and things like that. So I wanted to make some points here.
Sure.
So um, uh, some folks were saying that there wasn't really a whole lot in there that as far as details. So I don't want to get this wrong, but it's a request for proposal, and they're trying to find someone. They're going to make a choice of who is going to be who is going to do the work. But the design will be worked later, and I think that's not normally how it happens. But this
that is correct, and typically when we build or when bridges are built, you would go out for a design bid, and then that's going to take some time, and then they pick a design, and then they have to go through all of the environmental processes and approvals, and then they get into the actual construction phase. But in this particular situation, because the the initial funding has been secured from the federal government,
mm-hmm.
they are trying to find a firm that will be able to go in and act and design it, and then the consequential build. But if they can find the right construction company and design firms,
Mm-hmm.
this process is a little bit backwards because of the time sensitivity and the situation of what's happened. If we were
Right.
just very very different than the Bay Bridge discussions that are being had about replacing the Chesapeake Bay Bridge for
Right.
right there on Route 50.
Right.
So you can't compare the two, because this is a fix to a problem. Kind of a natural disaster or
Mm-hmm.
disastrous type problem.
Mm-hmm.
We still have a bridge at the Bay Bridge crossing, so that's what some of the difference is.
Right. And from what I understand, this is the normal sped up procedure. And there's a term I've heard it 1,000 times, and now I can't repeat it. Anyway, but so they didn't just make this up. This is how they normally do things when they want to get them done fast. And I forget what the term is. I apologize.
Sure.
So let me get to some of these interesting things. So there were some tidbits that some folks were able to pull out. The long span complex bridge engineer should have experience with cable stayed or supported structures. So we've
that kind of
talked about, everybody's kind of guessed or assumed or that this cable stayed design, which is different from the suspension bridge type, like the main span of the Bay Bridge, but more like some other more recent designs, and they're faster to build. That we thought that might be what they might be going for. So to see
one
this
of the
detail.
one of the models that if you want a perspective of what this thing may look like, take a look at the Ravenel Bridge down in Charleston, South Carolina, and what that design looks like. It's going to be very similar to that in the concept.
Gotcha. And then this is a one-step procurement. The contract shall be awarded to the responsive and responsible offerer submitting the proposal that has been determined to be the most advantageous for the state, considering price and evaluation factors set forth in this RFP. So it is not a low bid contract. Rather, award may be made to the offerer with a higher technical rating, even if its price is not the lowest. So, let's get the best capable. When we're building something as significant as this, let's get the best capable people.
This is not the time to go cheapest price and cheapest quality. There's definitely some quality related aspects that need to be addressed, and that highest level of quality solution in the quickest amount of time.
Right.
So they're looking at those things and understanding, and you can understand within the RFP that they're what the specific goals are from the time, the quality, the effort, and while don't read this as, hey, just because it says not the cheapest price, don't come in at the highest level also. That's why they have this scorecard that will help address the best selection.
Right. They just wanted to say that, this isn't going to be the cheapest. We're not going to go for the most expensive on purpose either, but it's not necessarily good. It may wind up being the cheapest, but we may choose somebody who has a higher technical score to do the job better, more capable. And then I'll read this and then summarize. The remaining sections of the bridge are they're going to be people keep asking, can they reuse them? No, they can't, because they require that the bridge has a 75-year design life. So you can't grab some old sections of an old bridge that are 50 years old now. Think about that. 50 years old. So anyway, so they're going to get rid of that. And we know that because it says MDTA desires to remove the existing portions of the bridge structure still standing as early as practical, permittable, and approvable as early work package and amendment of this contract.
That's interesting.
So I know, right? And so what maybe some of you, maybe like me, are like, well, what does that gobbledygook mean? But I wanted to read it as it was written. And to me, that means the salvers and the people who are out there working now are not going to be the ones to remove those. It's going to be part of the bridge building contract, which it doesn't matter really, but that surprised me because I guess incorrectly assumed that whoever was out there now were going to get rid of everything.
Take everything down. So look at it this way. So you mentioned in previous podcasts that we had 3 contractors from 3 different government entities handling 3 different aspects of the bridge mitigation project. Right. So those were 3 very defined tasks. So you said the ship, the bridge, and the channel. Okay, and so that was only to the parts that were damaged in the way. The remaining parts of the bridge that are still there, aren't part of those three projects, and that's what this RFP kind of alludes to. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to the MDTA is going to be looking at, you know, the, along with what you just said, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's only a 20-year, 10 to 20-year lifespan left of those components of that old bridge.
Exactly.
They need to be taken out, but you're also going to have to look at alignment with the existing beltway. Where is it crossing? You know, and how close they are to the to those BG&E power lines or not. You know,
Mm-hmm.
all of that needs to be taken into consideration into the design process.
Mm-hmm. Could I
So,
jump in here for a
yeah,
second?
sure.
So, and we have heard that. So, when you're talking about, like, let's say the power lines are here and the bridge is here, that distance will be the same because they've said the new bridge will be built on the existing bridge center line. So, so in the same place, basically.
So they're going to have to take the existing bridge components down as part of this process, and they're going to remove it and replace it with the new, with the new components. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where this is at. But the, what I also found interesting is that they're not going to wait for that to be gone to start the bridge building process. It's
Hmm.
going to happen in conjunction. So this firm, really is going to need to go and take those components down. And it may be that they start working in the middle of the channel. I don't know because I'm not
Oh, yeah.
bridge engineer person here.
That's a good
But
point.
they may be able to start work in other areas in the bridge footprint, and at the same time
Right.
take it down. So there are some efficiencies that can be done during the construction process to speed.
That's a good point because you know what I was thinking, and I am not a civil engineer. I'm not a bridge engineer. But so what they build a coffer dam, right? So they
Mhm.
built a big box on the bottom, and then they pump all the water out so that they can drive pilings or rods into the mud as far down as they go, right? Because they take a ram or what is the tool called? And
I don't know. I'm not a bridge engineer.
right, and it keeps hitting the pie, and so they analyze.
Mhm.
They take
Yes.
core samples, right, and they know how far down each one will go until it stops, right? And they have all that engineered, and then they build the concrete on top of those to create this structure support for the bridge. And I would imagine that the last thing they want to do is try to do that in the exact same place where the current structures are. And I also have developed a friendship with a tug captain who actually worked on the 301 bridge,
Oh, okay.
the building and removing of the old one to where they get down there like just above the mud line with divers and put a giant diamond cutting saw on the
Mm,
pilings and remove them above the mud line.
interesting.
Right. And so I guess if, when we showed that picture before of that, one of the legs of the triangular piling, maybe the same kind of thing, except the one on the Dali was used, above water in the air. And
Right.
I don't know if it's the same or a different one that they use underwater. But that's what he expected to happen.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. So if you're going to be driving fresh pilings into fresh mud, you've got to pick. So there's all these whatever places where the original bridge was supported, and then you would have to miss those locations.
Sure.
I also heard somebody say that some of the wording had said minimal supports in the river for the bridge. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I think in some of the new designs with these cable bridges, you're able to make a much wider footprint for to
Mm-hmm.
cover a channel. With
Right.
the suspension bridge that the model that existed before, it spanned the distance because that's what that truss could support. And
Mhm.
these new bridge designs allow for wider stances between the bridge supports. So
Right, right. Yeah. So I also wanted to talk real quickly about some shipping news, some shipping updates.
okay,
So, wow, really cool, I think, just to see the port coming back to life. So much coming and going. One time last week, there were 8 ro-ros in port.
yeah.
So roll on, roll off, these big boxy ships that you can roll anything on or off that has wheels. And why are 8 ro-ros in port? Because Baltimore, the number one auto importer in the United States, 13 years running. So, um, some people who are friends of the live stream go, "Oh, geez, another one of these boring boxy ships coming." I mean, hey, that's what we do here, man.
Exactly.
That's part of our claim to fame. So, cruise ships came back on the 26th and the 24th. The 26th, your typical Carnival Sunday, right? So Royal Caribbean might differentiate. They might be on a Saturday or a Thursday. So, they'll play with their dates, but Carnival's pretty locked into Sunday. So you can almost count just about every Sunday, 7 to 9 a.m. Here comes the Carnival Pride. And 5 to 6 p.m., there goes the Carnival Pride out on a new cruise. So that was really cool to see that resumption of normalcy.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to see maybe some a push or an increase in the cruise sector within the port, especially with Jonathan Daniels here, who's the executive director of the Maryland Port Administration. He came from Port Everglades, which is Fort Lauderdale,
Right.
but in the shipping world, Port Everglades
Mm-hmm.
is the known name. They're a heavy cruise port, and rightfully so. They're that close down to the Caribbean.
Right.
But I think that Jonathan has some plans to increase the cruise business here, and I get that we're kind of in a niche market for cruise
Right.
embarkations. Maybe that's a word that somebody can call me out on for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're gonna
but
hear about that one.
but I think we're going to have some other opportunities, not only with how close Bermuda is for some quick trips out,
Mm-hmm.
but with some of the changes that are happening up and down the East Coast with cruise operations. I know that Charleston, where I'm from, the cruise terminal was just purchased by a local investor to go and redevelop that area into
Oh.
some residential use and public
Oh,
use property. So
that's
then that opens up other opportunities up and down the East Coast for
hmm.
other stops for cruise lines. So I think we're poised to be able to get some business within the cruise industry also.
Oh yeah, and we had talked to him. We attended one of the port meetings, and I, I asked a question about the cruise industry because I knew where he came from, and oh my gosh, he rattled off what 5 different companies and 5 different ships. He already knew the dimensions of the ships. He already knew the names of the ships. He had it all memorized. So I mean,
He
this
even
guy
knew.
is pro
He,
Baltimore,
yeah,
and he's already got it all in his head about how he may expand cruising here in Baltimore. So
yeah, that was fascinating to listen to. Absolutely.
that was, I mean, just wait a minute. You know all this stuff already? I just asked a question. You just right off. I mean, pretty impressive. Another shipping update. So we're getting our first big. I mean, we got a Conroe and a container ship right now. Last night. So Saturday morning on the live stream, very cool to see the cranes working containers on 2 container ships at a time. It's just great stuff for people who work at the port, and everything that they support: trucking, warehouses. it's a lot more than just, the guy who has the really cool job of, driving the crane out from over the ship and picking up the container and putting it on the truck, right? I mean, there's a lot more that's supported when that happens.
And
So, but
I think related to that we can also start talking about some of these terms that are used out in public, like supply chain. During the
yes,
pandemic, you had supply chain disruptions, but people weren't quite sure what that term meant, or the
yeah,
term
what does that
logistics.
mean?
Yeah, we'll
Right.
we'll start covering what those terms mean, and what you just described is part
Right.
of the supply chain of all of the different components that's involved to get products from manufacturing to the retail operations where you can go into your Walmart or Target to go buy this stuff. So we'll start
Right.
explaining those concepts.
Yeah, that's what's that subject matter line 45. I mean,
Yeah,
we got a whole list of stuff we want to cover.
just added to the list
But
there.
and so remember when they had those West Coast issues, right? Where ships were backing up and it was on the national news at night, and we got 21 new ships here in Baltimore um, because of that, because of how well our port is run, how efficient, how fast we are. If you go to the website, baltimoreshipwatchers.com, go to the shipping links about 3 or 4 down, the public schedule for container ships is on there. There's a little arrow on the right. Click on that. Go to June. Well, it is June
Okay.
now. Never mind. Uh, and you can see where the calendar is starting to fill up with container ships. So real quickly, there are 6 days on that calendar with 3 ships per day, which is
Wow.
really cool. And then 11 days with 2 ships, container ships. So really starting to fill up. And then June 10th, and it might flex 9th, 10th, 11th, is supposed to be the first really big container ship that we're used to getting around here. So sister ship of the Ever Forward, the Ever Forever, is supposed to be here on June 10th. So that's a cool
Another one of
turning
those
point,
evergreen
I
ships.
think. Hmm. I'm sorry.
Yeah, another one of those evergreen ships.
Yes, yes. But I wanted to say that for me, that's a turning point in the port when you can see, some of the biggest ones that we were used to seeing here before the accident,
Yeah.
coming back. So that's really cool.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think that covers everything that we were going to try to talk about this morning. Do you have any closing thoughts? Any
I
plans
do
this week?
want to share. I do want to share one thing, and this is like one of
Okay.
those. This is one of those. Okay, what did you do? You you bought this house with your wife 8 years ago, and you can see the ships go by, and a few months later you create a Facebook group, right? 7, 8 years later, we're on Twitter and X. We've got a website. We've got a live stream camera. We're doing a podcast. We've got 15,000 people in the group. And as we grow and this thing takes its own path at the times, you're kind of surprised and kind of taken aback at some of the cool stuff that happens, stuff that you never thought could happen. So here is a photo taken by one of our best photographers, Dead Rise Marine Photography. The guy on the left is a young fellow from Annapolis. He goes by Pork Chop because that's the name of his little boat that he takes that thing anywhere.
Okay.
And so he's showing Captain Jan Miles of the Pride of Baltimore the fact that, and they're on the Pride of Baltimore in this photo. And so he's got the live stream up on his phone, and he's showing the captain of the ship that he's on that, hey, we're on this live stream camera right now. So you're basically
This hand and
watching.
you can
So,
wave to yourself.
right? I mean, so just really cool stuff. So we're looking at them, looking at themselves. How deep does this go? Anyway,
I need another cup of coffee to figure that one out.
right. So it really cool to see.
That is really cool.
They're sailing by, and hey, look, we're on camera. Just another neat thing that's happened that you never could have envisioned 6, 7, 8 years ago. Kind of cool.
Maybe you can print that off and you can autograph it for me.
Quit it. That'll be 1995. No,
there you go. Yeah.
All right, so I think we're done, huh?
I think we're done for today. We'll go ahead and sign off. You want to run through all the social media handles and everything? I will have put up on the screen right at the end so that you can go and click on and go to these different sites. But go ahead, rattle it off.
Yep. So Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay Shipwatchers Facebook group, so you can find us there. We also are on Instagram, X, and YouTube, which is one of the places where you'll find this podcast as Balto Ches. So old school, if you were to abbreviate Baltimore on an envelope, so Balto and Ches, one word. Also, our website, baltimoreshipwatchers.com. So there's all kind of cool links, maps of the port, the live stream. There's a link to the podcast on there, photographs, swag. So like this coffee cup with our trademark logo with the
really
Key
cool
Bridge logo.
That's right.
That we created like 2 years ago before the accident. I mean, who would have known? But so we've got coffee cups, hats, 4 or 5 different kind of T-shirts, and some hoodies. And you can just go order them online, and they ship them right to you.
I think you said once that some of the proceeds go to charity.
Yes. Thank you. Absolutely. So 25% of the proceeds go to Baltimore International Seafair Center, who are the folks who, when it's not just a Dali who's stuck in town for 2 months, the ships that come and go, sometimes ships are here for 2 weeks. And so they visit them, make sure they're okay, make sure they have, good fresh food supplies on board, maybe take them shopping if they need something. They might, because it is a charity, it's religiously run. So, maybe they would like to have communion or have a blessing or, so just a myriad of things that they do for these folks when they visit town. So yes, 25% of the proceeds from all the swag I just mentioned go to the Seafair Center.
Great,
Thank you.
Great. So you can get your swag, you can support the Shipwatchers group that you're part of, and you're helping out a good cause.
Absolutely.
Also, for those of you who are like me, who now have doubled my commute, going through the tunnels every day, and you listen to the audio podcast, you can also get this podcast on the Spotify platform and the Apple podcast platforms right now. So
awesome.
You can navigate there and subscribe to those and get those when we get everything published. So
yeah. So back to YouTube. So and I forget, I did have it figured out that one time. Remember, I was like, the like is here and subscribe and hit the bell. So subscribe is one thing. And then when you hit the bell, then you'll be alerted when we post a new video.
There you go. Mm-hmm. There you go. All right. Hope you have a good week. I know that this week's upcoming podcast, we're going to have Reverend Josh Messick is going to join us. We'll be able to have some conversations around the Seafarers initiatives. So that'll be cool. I think that's going to be an entertaining podcast. I'm expecting that to be quite entertaining. So
I would think so. And maybe we'll talk about Fleet Week, which is, my gosh, coming up so fast. So we've got one more podcast before Fleet Week, and it's the next one. So we've got to cover that in some detail.
We'll do an introduction to that so that everybody can learn how they can participate.
Right, and that might be all we cover. Sure. The Seafair Center and Fleet Week, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's
Sounds good.
let's go about our day. Hope you have a good weekend.
Yep.
And as we sign off, ready?
Yep.
Happy ship watching.
Happy ship watching.
Happy ship watching. All right.
All right. See you all later.
Everybody take it easy.